Siemano. Kurczę, no takie mam zagwozdki dziwne. Co tu grać? Czy hoj, czy... Czy w hojka, czy w to, czy w tamto. Czy sobie pooglądamy jedną rzecz. O. Zrobimy tak, to puścimy. Kurczę, tak się wkręciłem w tych Hearts of Iron pieprzone, że...
Nim doszło do zmiany u steru władzy w latach 1932-33, NSDAP przez lata uchodziła w Niemczech za ugrupowanie marginalne i bezsilne pod względem politycznym. O ile ostra retoryka Hitlera i jego powoli budującego się otoczenia w latach 20. była czymś atrakcyjnym dla tej części społeczeństwa, która czuła hańbę po porażce I wojny światowej i szukała nowej narracji dotyczącej kraju, o tyle nie wzbudzała ona szerszego zainteresowania wśród niemieckich elit politycznych i przemysłowych. Znane są zresztą relacje członków NSDAP z tego okresu, wedle których przez pierwsze lata działalności ugrupowania miewano problemy z postawieniem piwa wszystkim przybyłym na spotkanie z Hitlerem. W związku z tym ugrupowanie musiało opierać swoje finansowanie o składki członkowskie, wejściówki sprzedawane na niektóre spotkania, przychody z prasy wydawanej przez NSDAP oraz to, co udało się zagrabić podczas napaści na przeciwników politycznych dokonywanych przez brunatne koszule. Jeśli jednak ugrupowanie myślało o poważnym starcie w wyborach, to musiało zdobyć darczyńców, a więc zdobyć przychylność potentatów przemysłu oraz postaci z życia kulturalnego kraju. Zwłaszcza, że pucz monachijski z roku 1923 dobitnie udowodnił, że na siłowe przejęcie władzy naziści nie mają co liczyć. Pierwszym poważniejszym sponsorem NSDAP był Dietrich Eckart, dziennikarz i niespełniony dramaturg, którego wyjątkowo dotknęła przegrana Niemiec w Wielkiej Wojnie oraz wydarzenie, które nastąpiło zaraz po niej, a więc komunistyczna rewolucja listopadowa w Niemczech. Wydarzenia te uznał on za dowód na sukces komunistycznych Żydów, co sprawiło, że retoryka nazistów była dla niego niezwykle atrakcyjna, gdyż potwierdzała jego wcześniejsze uprzedzenia. W związku z tym Eckart zaangażował się w działalność partii. Między innymi kupił Hitlerowi kilka eleganckich strojów, dzięki czemu lepiej prezentował się w czasie wystąpień publicznych oraz wprowadził przyszłego Führera na salony, co pozwalało poznać mu wpływowych ludzi. Jednak jego najważniejszym wkładem w początkowy rozwój NSDAP było publikowanie tygodnika Auf gut Deutsch, który stał się pierwszą oficjalną gazetą partii. Eckart pomógł także pod kątem finansowym w przejęciu Volkische Beobachter, a więc lokalnego tygodnika, który partia odkupiła za łączną kwotę 100 000 marek i który w przyszłości miał się stać jednym z głównych nośników propagandy narodowo-socjalistycznej. Ta ofensywa medialna, mimo nieudanego puczu w 1923, miała wkrótce przynieść wyraźne korzyści, gdyż wieści o NSDAP i jej planach zaczęły docierać do elit przemysłowych Niemiec i innych krajów. Kolejną osobą kluczową dla wzrostu znaczenia NSDAP miał okazać się Ernst Hanfstaengl, pół Niemiec, pół Amerykanin, absolwent Harvardu, wywodzący się z bogatej rodziny kolekcjonerów i sprzedawców sztuki. W 1922 roku, kiedy to posłał go do Monachium, celem podzielenia się opinią na jego temat z resztą klubu. Mężczyzna był głęboko zafascynowany postacią przywódcy ruchu i pomimo iż początkowo nie dołączył do ugrupowania, to z wielką chęcią wprowadzał działaczy partii do oświetlenia Niemiec i USA, dając szansę na poznanie wpływowych przemysłowców, oficerów, ludzi kultury czy pomimo mieszanego odbioru samej postaci Hitlera, która przez część towarzystwa była odbierana prześmiewczo jako polityczny agitator bez zaplecza, przyszłemu Führerowi udało się nawiązać pierwsze kontakty z poważnymi inwestorami, takimi jak choćby rodzina Bechsteinów, którzy posiadali fortepianów, czy Fritzem Thyssen, potentatem przemysłowym i właścicielem zakładów metalurgicznych Thyssen AG. Istotniejsze były jednak działania Hanfstaengla w USA, gdzie Ernst sprzedawał pochwalne artykuły o Hitlerze tamtejszemu potentatowi medialnemu Williamowi Randolphowi Hearstowi. W ich ramach przedstawiano plany partii związane z dalszym rozwojem przemysłowym Niemiec, podkreślając, że NSDAP będzie otwarte na współpracę z potentatami zza oceanu na preferencyjnych warunkach. Zaś Hitlera nazywano dobrym dyktatorem, który nie będzie stawał na drodze przemysłowi, tak jak robi to podatny na lobbying rząd amerykański, przedstawiając nazistów jako środowisko, w które opłaca się zainwestować. Teksty te dotarły wkrótce do jednego z głównych zagranicznych fundatorów partii, Henry'ego Forda. Potentat, poza byciem niezwykle zamożnym człowiekiem i innowatorem przemysłowym, był też znanym antysemitą, który podzielał opinię Hitlera i jego otoczenia na temat żydowskiego spisku. W związku z tym zaczął zasilać fundusze partii za pośrednictwem kontaktów ulokowanych w Szwecji, aby utajnić tę Ponadto sam Ford na tyle zachwycił się postacią Hitlera, że co roku w dzień jego urodzin przesyłał mu czek na kilkadziesiąt tysięcy marek. Oczywiście nie odbywało się to czysto bezinteresownie. NSDAP po przejęciu władzy oferowała firmie Ford nie tylko preferencyjne stawki podatkowe, ale także pomogła w uruchomieniu 2 fabryk w Berlinie i Kolonii. Zaś za oferowaną pomoc i wkład w rozwój przemysłu niemieckiego Henry Ford został uhonorowany w 1937 roku Krzyżem Wielkim Orderu Orła Niemieckiego, a więc najwyższym odznaczeniem, jakie mógł za zasługi dla Rzeszy otrzymać obywatel innego kraju. Ostatecznie NSDAP w roku 1933, między innymi dzięki finansowaniu zagranicznemu oraz coraz silniejszej pozycji wśród przedsiębiorców niemieckich, udało się zgromadzić kwotę 3 milionów marek, które posłużyły Goebbelsowi do przeprowadzenia kampanii wyborczej o rozmachu, o którym dotąd nie słyszano. Fundusze pozwoliły m.in. na ciągłą reklamę w radiu, przemieszczanie Hitlera między miastami samolotem, co umożliwiło mu dotarcie do większej liczby wyborców, czy rozrzucanie ulotek z powietrza nad miastami. Oczywiście tak duża inwestycja w politykę wiązała się z dużymi oczekiwaniami ze strony sponsorów. Wielu przedstawicieli przemysłu w tamtym czasie przynależało już do NSDAP, co wiązało się z koniecznością odpowiedniego wynagrodzenia przez partię swoich popleczników oraz wsparcie ich działalności po przejęciu władzy. Inaczej Hitler ryzykowałby zniechęceniem do siebie zarówno dotychczasowych sympatyków, jak i społeczeństwa niemieckiego, które zmagało się w tym czasie z inflacją i bezrobociem dotykającym 6 milionów obywateli. Problemami, których bez wsparcia przemysłu Hitler nie mógłby rozwiązać. W związku z tym władze III Rzeszy po wygranych wyborach postawiły na lukratywne zamówienia publiczne, które postanowiono finansować obligacjami, dzięki czemu gospodarka mogła zacząć błyskawicznie się rozwijać, choć odbywało się to poprzez emisję kredytu. Hitler zaakceptował jednak to ryzyko, gdyż już w tamtym czasie szykował się do wojny, która odsunęłaby spłatę zobowiązań i potencjalnie dawałaby możliwość zasilania budżetu wojennymi zdobyczami. Jedną z pierwszych firm, która wiele zyskała na współpracy z nazistami, był Hugo Boss. Dziś legendarna firma odzieżowa, jednak wówczas u progu lat 30. małe przedsiębiorstwo zadłużone na 30 tysięcy marek. Wstąpienie jego szefa do NSDAP poskutkowało po przejęciu władzy przez Hitlera masowymi zamówieniami publicznymi na mundury SA, SS czy Hitlerjugend. Dzięki temu firma, która w roku 1932 zarobiła 38 tysięcy marek, w roku 1941 przyniosła już przychód rzędu 3,3 miliona marek. W czasie wojny mogła dodatkowo obniżać koszty produkcji poprzez wykorzystywanie pracowników przymusowych przywiezionych z Polski i Czech. Po wojnie właściciel firmy...
Znasz jakieś stare strategie? Stare strategie? Siemanko, Mister Danio. Stare strategie. To w pierwszego hoja możesz sobie zagrać. Command and Conquer.
Zwłaszcza, że jednocześnie pozwolono firmie przetrwać po tym, jak przekazano stery nad nią zięciowi Hugo Bossa, przez co działa ona z sukcesami do dziś. Hitlera wspierały także przedsiębiorstwa o już ugruntowanej pozycji biznesowej, takie jak powszechnie dziś znany dr Edgar. Legendarna firma z Niemiec już w 1903 roku opatentowała
Inflation.
który rocznie sprzedawał się w ilościach kilkudziesięciu milionów sztuk. Jednakże dzięki dołączeniu do SS wnuka założyciela firmy, Rudolfa Augusta Edgara, firma zagwarantowała sobie zamówienia Wehrmachtu na żywność oraz stały dopływ pracowników przymusowych z całej Europy. Do tego prezes firmy, Richard Kasselowski, pozostawał w przyjacielskich stosunkach z samym Hitlerem, dzięki czemu firma mogła między innymi za bezcen przejmować majątek po Żydach, jak na przykład browar Grotteria, który do dziś służył korporacji jako odnoga produkująca napoje. W tym aspekcie warto przyjrzeć się także historii firmy ubezpieczeniowej Allianz. Miała ona silną pozycję jeszcze przed dojściem Hitlera na władzę, jednak po roku 1933 za ogromną pomoc finansową płynącą od spółki Hitler nagrodził prezesa przedsiębiorstwa Kurta Schmidta stanowiskiem ministra gospodarki, które piastował do roku 1935. Pozwoliło to podmiotowi w kolejnych latach m.in. na tajne negocjacje dotyczące przeprowadzonego w 1938 pogromu, znanego dziś jako Kryształowa Noc. Umówiono się, że firma będzie mogła nie wypłacać odszkodowań ubezpieczonym w niej Żydom, zaś tak uzyskanymi pieniędzmi podmiot miał podzielić się z rządem po połowie. Kolejną umowę firma zawarła z władzą już po wybuchu wojny. Allianz zaangażowano bowiem w ubezpieczanie majątku trwałego garnizonów obozów koncentracyjnych.
Kurwa, nie mam tego.
Allianz miał udział w rabunku mienia,
Ja pierdolę.
po przewiezieniu więźniów do obozu. Dodatkowo firma w pełni wiedziała o tym, co dzieje się w obozach, gdyż regularnie kontrolowała je w ramach oceny ryzyka ubezpieczeniowego, jednak milczała na ten temat w przestrzeni publicznej aż do końca wojny. Na dojściu Hitlera do władzy zyskały też podmioty związane z motoryzacją, takie jak legendarne dziś Porsche. Führer miał bowiem obsesję na punkcie infrastruktury drogowej i rozwijania automobilności kraju. Do dziś trwają spory o to, kto dokładnie był inicjatorem pomysłu, ale współpraca szefa koncernu Ferdynanda Porsche z Hitlerem doprowadziła do stworzenia w 1938 roku samochodu dla ludu, popularnego dziś garbusa. Samochód o wartości poniżej 1000 marek stał się niezwykle popularny i był potężnym impulsem rozwojowym dla samego Porsche, co pozwoliło przedsiębiorstwu w okresie przedwojennym włączyć się także w produkcję zbrojeniową Rzeszy, dzięki czemu w czasie wojny również mogło korzystać z pracowników przymusowych z Europy. Po wojnie prezes firmy został pozbawiony stanowiska i był więziony przez Francuzów przez okres około 2 lat, jednak podobnie jak w przypadku Hugo Bossa, firma przetrwała, ponieważ przejął ją członek rodziny, syn Ferdynanda, który przemodelował słynny KDF-Wagen na Volkswagena, będącego dziś jednym z największych podmiotów gospodarczych wywodzących się z Niemiec, zaś spółka matka kilka lat po wojnie skupiła się na produkcji samochodów sportowych, na czym również zarobiła krocie. Ważnym ramieniem przemysłu nazistowskiego były również firmy farmaceutyczne, takie jak Bayer czy BASF. Firmy te w roku 1925 połączono w ogromny konglomerat IG Farben, w którego powstanie był zaangażowany m.in. sam John Rockefeller, który wyłożył część z ponad 600 milionów marek kapitału zakładowego poprzez kontrolowaną przez niego korporację naftową Standard Oil. Uzyskanie takiego zagranicznego finansowania zawdzięczano m.in. pozytywnej prasie, jaką otrzymywała za oceanem NSDAP w gazetach kontrolowanych przez wspomnianego Williama Harsta, które zachęcały do inwestycji w Niemcy oraz w samo NSDAP. W ramach wdzięczności za okazane wsparcie IG Farben najpierw wyłożyła połowę środków na kampanię Hitlera w roku 1930, następnie zaś zasiliła budżet III Rzeszy w latach 1933-34 astronomiczną kwotą 84 milionów marek. W zamian szefowie korporacji zasiadali na prominentnych pozycjach rządu III Rzeszy, a firma w czasie wojny osiągnęła rekordowy przychód roczny w wysokości 4,2 miliarda marek. Angażując się w
Kurwa, kasę zbijali.
i farmaceutycznego,
XPP.
firma była głównym dostawcą smarów, ropy syntetycznej, zaawansowanych komponentów chemicznych, ale także leków i stymulantów dla armii czy niesławnego cyklonu B, wykorzystywanego w obozach koncentracyjnych. Koncern był także zaangażowany w grabieże na ziemiach podbitych przez Niemców oraz tworzył zakłady w pobliżu obozów koncentracyjnych. Na przykład w zakładach IG Farben przy obozie Auschwitz pracowało w sumie kilkaset tysięcy więźniów, z których większość została wymordowana. Do tego zakłady te często wspierały eksperymenty medyczne w obozach, dostarczając leki, wirusy i bakterie do zarażania więźniów czy badając pobrane próbki. W roku 1945 ustalono, że łączny zysk netto IG Farben z czasów wojny to 6 miliardów marek. Po wojnie prezesi spółki dostali względnie niskie wyroki więzienia od 6 miesięcy do 8 lat, a sama korporacja została ponownie podzielona na firmy, które w 1925 weszły w jej skład. Zaznaczmy też, że w latach 50. wspomniani prezesi zostali ponownie przyjęci na prominentne stanowiska w rozbitej korporacji. Niemiecki biznes, choć dziś niechętnie się do tego przyznaje, był ściśle związany ze zbrodniczą działalnością państwa. Firmy miały zagwarantowane zamówienia publiczne, na których przemysłu, co znacząco ułatwiło dokonywanie zbrodni na skalę przemysłową. Po dziś dzień trwają zresztą spory dotyczące rozwiązania.
Hearts of Iron.
W roku 2000 firma dr Edker przegrała sprawę przed niemieckim Sądem Najwyższym i była zobowiązana wypłacić odszkodowania dawnym pracownikom przymusowym swoich fabryk. Ponadto w wywiadzie z 2013 roku spadkobierca firmy August Edker przyznał, że jego ojciec był zagorzałym nazistą i to on miał odpowiadać po wojnie za opóźnianie procesu wypłat odszkodowań. Jednakże ówczesne władze Niemiec zachodnich bardziej stawiały na rozwój biznesu niż rozliczanie wstydliwej przeszłości firmy. Wielkie podziękowania dla naszych patronów, którzy pozwalają nam poruszać również trudne tematy. A żeby nie przegapić kolejnych odcinków, nie zapomnij włączyć dzwoneczka powiadomień. Do usłyszenia.
Kurwa, to nie działa na tym XPP. Lechistanu.
November 1918. In Western Europe,
Kurwa.
the 4-year slaughter of World War I is drawing to an end. But across the former Russian Empire, a new conflict has broken out. A civil war that rages from Central Europe to the Pacific and will claim an estimated 9 million lives. Lenin, The Bolsheviks and their new Soviet Republic battle for survival against their many enemies, collectively known as the Whites. The Whites' great hope, their newly appointed supreme ruler of Russia, Admiral Alexander Kolchak. He is a war hero, a man of duty and discipline, who believes above all in service to the motherland. Millions look to him to crush the Bolsheviks, avenge the murdered Tsar, and save Russia from chaos and collapse. This is the extraordinary tale of the life and death of Admiral Kolchak, Russia's only supreme ruler. The Arctic Ocean, 1900. Russian scientific vessel Zarya sails east on a voyage of discovery to the outer fringes of the Russian Empire. The expedition leader is Baron Edward von Toll, a renowned Russian explorer and geologist. He intends to explore the Arctic Ocean and discover Sannikov Land, a near-mythical landmass rumored to lie north of the Novosibirsk Islands. Among his crew, 26-year-old Naval Lieutenant Alexander Vasilievich Kolchak. Kolchak had been a brilliant naval cadet, but service aboard the Petropavlovsk, one of Russia's newest battleships, had bored him. Kolchak had a passion for scientific discovery and oceanography, and a thirst for adventure. When Baron Toll asked him to join his expedition, he leapt at the chance. The dawn of the 20th century is an age of intense imperial rivalry and scientific exploration.
Attention!
Russia, under the autocratic reign of Tsar Nicholas II, seeks to modernize and learn more about its vast eastern territories. Toll's expedition is part of this process.
Part of this process.
In the annals of polar exploration. Toll was a deeply ambitious leader and expert geologist, but knew little about the sea. His ship, Zarya, was in poor condition and ill-suited for long voyages in the ice. Nevertheless, the expedition spent 2 years exploring the frozen coast, ice floes, and islands of Russia's Arctic north. On one occasion, Toll was marooned by a walrus. Kolchak was pursued by polar bears. In May 1902, frustrated by his failure to find Sannikov Land, Toll took an extremely dangerous decision.
Ethiopian.
With Zarya trapped in sea ice, he set off with 3 men traveling by sled to reach Bennett Island.
Benito Goldini.
A month later, and set off to collect him. But facing impenetrable ice and running out of coal, Zarya had to turn back. Toll and his team were stranded. Lieutenant Kolchak had distinguished himself as a key member of the expedition and a loyal comrade to Baron Toll. He was determined their leader should not be abandoned. Returning through
Communism.
miles to
Komuniści.
Petersburg, Kolchak helped to organize a rescue mission. His plan seemed insane. To reach Bennett Island without a ship, using only sleds and small boats. But in the absence of better options, his proposal was approved.
Loving you like loving the dead.
To return to the Arctic and begin preparations. On the 5th of May 1903, Kolchak's 17-man rescue expedition set off across 600 miles of snow and dangerous, shifting pack ice. Traveling by a combination of dog sled and whaleboat, it took 3 grueling months to reach Bennett Island, where they found no sign of Baron Toll. Just an abandoned campsite, some scientific observations, and a note.
Attention!
Departing south today, it read. We have provisions for 14 to 20
Gardez vos rangs.
days. All are in good health. The note was dated the 26th of October. It was 9 months old. No sign of Toll or his 3 companions was ever found.
Attention! Attention!
Despite its failure, Kolchak's daring rescue mission
Pareil.
won him national fame and the Imperial Geographical
Attention.
Society's highest award, the Constantine Medal.
Attention!
It also won him a nickname, Kolchak Polyarny, Polar Kolchak. Returning to Yakutsk in January 1904, Kolchak learned that Japan had attacked Russia's Far Eastern base
Pareil.
at Port Arthur, and war had been declared.
Gardez
There
vos
was
rangs.
an opportunity for action, and the service to the motherland that Kolchak craved.
Attention!
He immediately requested a transfer to the front. But first, he met his fiancée, Sofia Fyodorovna, in Irkutsk for their postponed wedding. 4 days later, he left for the Far East. The world expected Russia, a great Imperial power, to easily defeat Japan, an Asiatic upstart, according to racial views of the time. But instead, the war proved a frustrating and humiliating experience for Russia's military, with devastating defeats on land and sea, leading to a political crisis at home. There was little Lieutenant Kolchak could do to change the tide of war, bottled up with Russia's Pacific Fleet in Port Arthur. He nevertheless served with distinction and courage. As commander of a small, aging destroyer,
Attention!
his main role was laying mines at sea. In December 1904, one of his mines scored a major success, sinking
Gardez
the
vos rangs.
Japanese cruiser Takasago.
Attention!
But the repetitive nature of his duties was dogged by ill health.
Gardez vos rangs.
December 1904, the Japanese got close enough to Port Arthur to shell Russian warships
Pareil.
and land-based artillery. Ship by ship, Russia's Pacific Fleet was sent to the bottom. Days later, Port Arthur surrendered. Kolchak was among the 25,000 Russian prisoners, though as a sick and wounded officer,
Gardez vos rangs.
he was repatriated a few months later
Pareil.
and returned to his wife in St. Petersburg.
Bougez-vous!
The war had been a
Tirs
demoralizing
ennemis.
affair for Russia, and for Kolchak
Attention.
personally, though he received several medals
Attention.
for his leadership and bravery.
Attention!
Zapomniałem o tym jeszcze, kurwa.
Pareil.
1914,
Gardez vos rangs.
assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo sparks an international crisis. Austria-Hungary accuses Serbia of responsibility for the crime and plans to retaliate. This causes Nicholas II to mobilize Russia's army to support Serbia, a Slavic ally. In response,
Gardez vos rangs.
Austria's ally, Germany, declares war on Russia.
Attention!
Soon, all the great European empires are at war. That summer, as the Russian army
Pareil.
blundered towards disaster in East Russia, 39-year-old
Elitism.
Kolchak took command of a destroyer flotilla in Russia's Baltic fleet. The previous year he'd been described in an official report as an outstanding officer in every respect. Firm character, well-mannered, very disciplined. Kolchak was, in every way, a model Tsarist officer.
Attention.
Now in the Baltic, he and his flotilla
Bougez-vous.
would enjoy notable success, despite the overwhelming superiority of the German Navy.
Attention.
Once more, mind warfare was the Russians' favored tactic.
Pareil.
In the early days of the conflict, Kolchak's flotilla alone laid 6,000 mines in the Gulf of Finland.
Okej.
These operations effectively shielded the Russian capital from attack by sea.
Limit.
To direct a series of bold night operations
Jak spierdala.
on the approaches to enemy ports, including Niemel, Danzig, and Kiel. Kolchak's courageous leadership won him
Hard working.
and a
politician.
Emperor Nicholas himself. In 1916, Kolchak was promoted, becoming the youngest admiral in the Russian Navy,
Giron.
with a new role,
Attention.
Commander-in-Chief of the Black Sea Fleet. He arrived at his headquarters at Sevastopol in Crimea in July. He was accompanied by his wife, Sofia, and their 6-year-old son. The couple had by now lost 2 children in infancy. Across the Black Sea, Kolchak faced Russia's old adversary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. Kolchak quickly adopted an aggressive strategy, laying mines off the enemy's coast and providing naval support for Russian operations near the Caucasus. His great hope was to launch an operation to capture the Bosporus Strait, which would be a decisive blow against the Ottomans, and open up a sea route.
Konstrukcjon.
Russia's first naval
Monaco City. Pojebało was?
created for this task and placed under Kolchak's command. But the operation would never happen. It remained a dream beyond Russia's capabilities. Nevertheless, Kolchak's success in the Black Sea made him famous once more. A celebrated war hero at a time when Russians were desperate for good news. Because from every other quarter, the news was of defeat, chaos, and turmoil.
Attention.
March 1917. On the streets of Russia's capital, renamed Petrograd, there were protests against food prices and the huge sacrifices of the war. It was the start of a revolution. The news took a few days to reach the Black Sea Fleet, 1,000 miles to the south in Crimea.
Light tank.
Admiral Kolchak, determined to prevent any unrest within his fleet, issued a proclamation. I order all officers of the Black Sea Fleet and land forces entrusted to me to continue firmly and unwaveringly to fulfill their duty to the Emperor and
Attention.
Motherland. The very next day, Nicholas II abdicated the throne. For Kolchak, it was a bewildering blow. Duty, discipline, loyalty to sovereign and motherland were all he knew. And he foresaw chaos ahead.
Attention.
In contrast, most of his sailors celebrated the news of revolution in Petrograd. Their life was one of the great conditions of discipline. Finally, here was a chance to overturn that hated regime. In Sevastopol, sailors elected their own Soviet council and formed their own committees. Initial demands included renaming every ship, which
Principality.
discipline and respect for authority began to collapse. Kolchak maintained a high
Gardez vos
tempo
rangs.
of military operations to keep his men occupied, but practically talked of facing the disgrace of a senseless mutiny in wartime. For 3 months, he held the fleet together, with firm leadership and careful compromises with his sailors. But Bolshevik capitalist war, and Tsarist officers like Kolchak removed from command. In June, the crew of his own flagship, the Georgy Pobedonosics, confronted the admiral. They demanded that all officers be stripped of their sidearms and swords. To avoid bloodshed, Kolchak agreed. But rather than hand over his own ceremonial sword, he hurled it into the sea. Even the Japanese, our enemies, let me keep my weapons, he told his men. You will not have them now. A few days later, Kolchak resigned his command and traveled to Petrograd. His wife and son remained in Crimea. He would not see them again.
Skorujemy sobie wszystko.
Kolchak had already publicly denounced the reforms of Russia's new provisional government, which he believed were destroying the military.
Kambodża.
Now, the story of his defiance in the face of mutiny made headlines across Russia. Kolchak's reputation among Russian conservatives was sky high. They even wondered if he might be the military dictator the country needed to restore law and order. Such whispers alarmed Russia's Minister of War, Alexander Kerensky, may even have seen Kolchak as a potential rival. So he met with Kolchak and informed him that he was to be sent abroad as part of a military mission to the Western Allies. In truth, it was what Kolchak himself described as a form of political exile. That summer, Kolchak sailed via Norway to Britain, then to the United States of America.
United States of America. United fucking States
And senior US naval officers.
America.
But plans for meaningful military cooperation between Russia and the Allies were clearly going nowhere. Kolchak accepted an invitation to return to Russia, to enter politics as a candidate for the Cadets, Russia's last non-socialist political party. But in Japan, en route home, he received shocking news. There had been a second revolution in Russia.
Revolution in Russia. Rosja. Rosja. Boże.
Kolchak was appalled by the October Revolution of 1917. He despised Lenin and the Bolsheviks, who'd soon rename themselves the Russian Communist Party.
Communist Party.
The cause of his this hostility was Lenin's plan to make an immediate peace with Germany. Like many Tsarist officers, Kolchak regarded Russia's commitments to her World War I allies as sacred. Lenin's negotiations with the Germans were both dishonorable and treasonous. Kolchak's course of action was clear. As an admiral of the Russian fleet, I considered our allied commitment to the war against Germany to remain in full force. The only form in which I could continue my service to the motherland, which was now in the hands of German agents and traitors, was to join the war effort against Germany on the side of our allies.
Flammenwerfer.
Kolchak offered his services to the British. They initially planned to send him to Mesopotamia, but soon backed him
Gardez vos
for
rangs.
a much larger role. With fighting still raging on World War I's Western Front, the Allies were desperate for Russia to rejoin the struggle against Germany. This meant removing Lenin and the Bolsheviks from power, who that July added to their crimes by executing Emperor Nicholas II and his entire family at Yekaterinburg. Therefore, as civil war engulfed Russia, the Allies would back the anti-Bolshevik forces, known as the Whites, against the Bolsheviks, the Reds. The British now put forward Admiral Kolchak as a man who could unify and liberate
XPP, siemanko.
proposal that met with
Daj 100 tysięcy i... Zarobiłeś 100 tysięcy i wydałeś 100 tysięcy.
in September 1918. Kolchak arrived in Vladivostok. Here he learned that anti-Bolshevik groups had recently met in Ufa and established a new provisional all-Russian government. This was effectively a continuation of the provisional government that had been swept aside by the Bolsheviks. Therefore, it had little support from Kolchak and other conservatives, who blamed the provisional government for leading Russia into chaos in the first place. That month, the advance of Bolshevik Red Army troops forced the
Rosja.
retreat to Omsk. Kolchak traveled 2,800 miles by train to join it.
Join it.
On the 5th of November 1918, after much discussion, he agreed to become the provisional government's Minister of War and Navy. 2
Attention.
days later, Kolchak formed a general staff and went to the front to assess the situation.
Rosja.
Across Russia, the military situation was incredibly complex. White Russian forces were scattered on Russia's periphery.
Referee.
Boldyrev commanded 180,000 provisional government troops on the Omsk front. General Denikin's volunteer army in southern Russia had around 50,000
Gardez vos rangs.
troops. The northern Russian government, a small white Russian enclave, had just 6,000 troops.
It's just 6,000
They were
troops.
supported by allied contingents of varying sizes, mostly in support and training roles. The Allies' most important contribution was sending arms, ammunition and supplies via Russia's seaports. Then there was the Czechoslovak Legion, about 50,000 strong, on the Omsk front. The Legion's story was an odd one. The unit, made up mostly of Czech volunteers, had been fighting alongside the Russians on the Eastern Front against the Germans.
Defense,
When the
nie, atak
Bolsheviks
trzeba
took over
wziąć.
and made peace with Germany, the Legion had received permission
Bo kupiłem nowy ciągnik lepszy od moich i kupiłem header do kombajna, ale żeby bawić się w plony to brakuje mi kilka maszyn, ale zarobię na to. A widzisz.
Bolsheviks then changed their mind and tried to disarm the Czechs, who fought back. The Legion was now stranded in Russia, but held key points along the Trans-Siberian Railway, the crucial east-west transport and supply route. To further complicate the picture, Russia's civil war
Suriname.
raged alongside several national wars and independence struggles in Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, and elsewhere. Russia's white forces, fragmented both geographically and often politically, faced the gigantic resources of Lenin's Bolshevik Russian state, controlling Russia's major
Rosja.
industrial centers and transport hubs, with
Aru.
800,000 troops under its command. It was a daunting prospect. The challenging military situation did nothing to ease political tensions among the whites. They included at one extreme left-wing socialist revolutionaries who'd led the February Revolution. At the other extreme, right-wing conservatives who wanted to restore the monarchy. This latter group had no more time for socialists and provisional governments. They believed only a strong dictator could
Gardez
save
vos rangs.
Russia now. On the 18th of November, they made their move. 300 Cossack troops rode into Omsk and arrested all the socialist revolutionary delegates they could find. The provisional government was abolished
Ra
by
ra
the
ri ri ra ra.
Council of Ministers. It then moved to elect a new supreme ruler of Russia, who would wield complete dictatorial power. The man they chose was Admiral Alexander Kolchak. A proven
Theater.
with a brilliant
Training.
military record, widely respected, in close contact with the Western allies. Above all, he was a man who shared their vision that only a return to law and order could save Russia from chaos. Kolchak himself had not sought the position of supreme ruler, believing
Supreme
others
ruler.
were better.
Rulers.
But duty had called, and he would answer. We hope you've enjoyed part 1 of our series on Admiral Kolchak, and if you'd like to be the first to see
Kolchak. Kolchak.
as well as episodes of other upcoming series, such as Napoleon in Egypt,
Gardez vos
we're
rangs.
delighted to announce that Epic History TV is now part of the Nebula streaming platform. On Nebula, you can watch all our videos, past, present and future, entirely
Attention.
ad-free, knowing that your sign-up directly supports our
Attention.
work. You'll also get access to videos from hundreds of other great
Gardez vos
creators,
rangs.
as well as Nebula originals,
Parez.
such as the epic 16 Days in Berlin by our friends at Real Time History, Modern Conflicts by Real Life Law, covering today's wars in a way that would never be possible on YouTube, or take a deep dive into the Battle of Britain with Real Engineering. Plus, Nebula classes
Okay.
for all those looking to develop their own creative skills. All this and a hefty discount for Epic History TV viewers. The link in our video description gets you both Nebula and Nebula classes for 40% off the annual plan. Or, the perfect gift for the holiday season, Nebula now offers lifetime
Attention.
membership for $300. That's a one-off payment to access everything that's on Nebula
Attention.
now and forever. This is not only great value over the long term, it is helping Nebula to invest in many more original projects, with some
Attention.
amazingly ambitious productions in the pipeline for 2024. And of course you get access to a truly unique
okay.
streaming service opportunity. With Lifetime, there'll be no price
XPP.
increases or monthly charges ever again. Nebula has been established by creators for creators to ensure they're more fairly rewarded for their work than on traditional ad-based platforms. So huge thanks to any Nebula subscribers watching, and
Nebula.
in advance to any viewers now planning to join us there. We hope you'll enjoy the many exclusives and features that Nebula has to offer, while helping us to keep making epic history. Thank you also, as ever, to the Epic History TV Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Visit our Patreon page to find out how you can support our work, help choose future topics, and get ad-free early access to new videos.
To za skam leci w tle? Jaki skam? Żaden skam. To wszystko jest... Jak to się mówi, legitne. Siemanko Nefarem, tak w ogóle. Agriculture, pa. Tu możemy ogarnąć. Deflation. Ok. Economic reforms. Come on, bro. Z lividem? A co się miało stać? Nie czaję. Hard attack nie. No ja kojarzę livida, ale... Takie samoloty zrobić? Bomb sites, co tu możemy jeszcze? Nie no, szybciej. To trzeba w gospodarkę na razie iść. Dismantle. Może się skończył. Nie wiem, no. On też coraz mniej, tak wiesz, istnieje, że tak powiem. Udziela się. O. Może dlatego. Jakąś gigadywizję stworzył. Duplicate oczywiście. Jakieś chojraki z artą. Myślę, że bez tego. Zrobimy takie coś. Takie coś. Może na razie takie coś. Tu damy 20 i może dwie arty. 26, no okej. Na razie 4 dywizje. Laj.
Attention.
Promote Charles de Gaulle oczywiście. Jeszcze nie mam marszałków, kurde. Co się stało? Colonial? Nie. Rearmament? O, o Jezus, tu jest rearmament, jakie plusy mamy, zajebiste. Industry. Lewej almost, to nie. Czemu nie mam generałów? X, kurwa, pay.
Garde
Gardez vos rangs.
Free City Danzig. Danzig. Dobra, trzeba będzie coś puścić, żeby tam w tle pierdziało. Army Organization. Może to. Kurczę, jeszcze będę musiał sobie sloty chyba dodać, tak szczerze, na tego moda, bo to jest w chuj rozszerzony, a mam 4 tylko z podstawki, no to trochę chujnie. Czekajcie. SD2 trzeba będzie dodać te research sloty, bo mam 10 razy więcej do badania, a 4 sloty z podstawki, no to trochę chujnie. Co tu jeszcze możemy? O, Stalingrad sobie obejrzmy.
This is a World War II super special. Yep, it's something we've never done before. It's an in-depth and long map special, and it's on the Battle of Stalingrad. In the regular weekly series, I covered Stalingrad week by week
Kurwa.
as it happened. Today, we look back at it through the maps we created, visualizing and narrating the whole story in one go. And I'm pretty sure you are going to like this.
Hot Wheels.
We made this masterpiece in collaboration with Call of War. It's a player versus player online strategy
Call of War, wow.
kind of decision making that takes place during a war. You choose a country to lead and can fight up to 100 other players in real time. That's a pretty cool aspect because some games can take weeks to complete, which really gives you a sense of the long-term strategic decisions that Stavko or OKW had to make for a massive battle like Stalingrad. On top of that, you can also use tanks, planes, and submarines. You can build up an army for when you declare war on your neighbors or protect them with alliances. You can choose your own strategy and engage in epic battles. So check it out. You can play with the same account on PC or mobile. Click on the link in the description to get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium
Whoa.
for free. And that's
Ale
just
scam.
for today, so be careful. Right. As regular viewers will know, the conquest of the Soviet oil fields in the Caucasus was one of the objectives of the German summer 1942 offensive in the Soviet Union. That offensive is Fall Blau, and it kicks off in late June, but that is not for today. I'm just setting the story, right? Just setting the scene. We begin the week ending August 14th, when the quest for oil is proving fruitless. The Axis enter Maykop and Krasnodar both on August 9th, only to find that the Soviets have thoroughly wrecked all of the oil installations. Army Group A is now extended over a huge area with supplies low and Soviet resistance increasing. Their strength is waning, and they have achieved none of
Strength is
their
waning.
objectives. Further to the northeast on the 9th, Stalingrad front is subordinated to the southeastern front, so Vasily Gordov becomes Andrei Yeremenko's deputy. The Axis are advancing to the city's external defense line. This is line O. Behind it are lines K and S, and then line G is within the actual city. Soviet Chief of Staff Alexander Vasilevsky and Yeremenko meet up the 12th. Yeremenko thinks that since the enemy is getting rid of the Soviet bridgeheads on the west bank of the Don and west of Kalach, and as close as
Kalach.
he will soon launch a major attack against the Soviet 4th Tank Army to try and force a crossing of the Don itself. That Kalach pocket contains chunks of Anton Lopatin's 62nd Army, and German 6th Army Commander Friedrich Paulus claims over 35,000 prisoners and 270 tanks destroyed. However, as many as half of Lopatin's soldiers escaped east over the Don to fight
Rozwija,
yet another
rozwija.
drain on 6th Army's time and resources. Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army was stopped at the end of last week. Vasily Chuikov's operational group holding back his left wing. So Hoth splits his forces, the main bulk around Afganirovo fighting 64th Army, and a smaller one against Chuikov. All this week, the Romanian 6th Corps and units of German 4th Army Corps assault Chuikov's positions, not making much headway until the 13th, when 64th Army orders them to slowly withdraw to avoid being surrounded. As for Mikhail Shumilov's 64th Army and its patchwork of forces, they launch a counterattack the 9th, featuring over
Melpomene, Melpomena.
400 big guns and mortars against the spearheaded 48th Panzer Corps, which is a decent advantage in big guns over those 3 German divisions, equal armor, and more manpower. For 2 days, they fight along the Tikhoris-Stalingrad railway line. Red
Attention.
Army General Staff Daily Report for the 11th says that 64th Army has done its job, throwing the enemy back from its forward positions. So now the front stabilizes here, and Hoth cannot reach Stalingrad without reinforcements. His 4th Panzers have failed to take the outskirts of Stalingrad, much like 6th Army has failed to surround and destroy the Soviets west of the Don. 6th Army is
Kurwa, nie mam tych, ja pierdolę.
corner of the Don River bend. Paulus launches his main attack 6:30 a.m. on the 5th.
Sends reports.
beginning with a 2-hour
Kurwa,
artillery
po chuj mi te reportsy.
bombers support the Panzer spearheads as they
Yeah.
in the middle of Vasily Kryuchenkin's tank army and head east. As for 4th Panzer Army, their attacks to the north of Afganirovo Station, the 20th, failed.
Ja
By the end
pierdolę.
of the week, 48th Panzer
XPP.
Corps has been a wedge 20 kilometers deep and 15 wide between 64th and 57th armies. If 64th Army cannot close that, they might be surrounded from the east. 6th Army now begins its drive for the suburbs of Stalingrad. The night of the 22nd, most of 16th Panzer
Kurwa,
Division
no.
moves to its jumping off point east of the River Don. This is a bridgehead like 5 kilometers wide and maybe 2 deep. Soviet artillery and bombers try to knock the bridge out to no avail, and at 4:15 a.m. the Panzers blast off, an armored punch aiming right across the bare steppes for the Volga. Stalingrad or bust, with heavy Luftwaffe support, including a devastating aerial bombardment of the city itself by 8th Air Corps. At 11:10 p.m., August 23rd, the 79th Panzer Grenadier Regiment radios from the Volga that they were located in Spartanovka, the northerly suburb of Stalingrad. The German advance has split the front in two. They've cut the railway lines from the city to the north and the northwest. Most communications between Moscow and the Caucasus are cut. They've reached the river, and the bombing of the city has impaired all industrial and military activity. Vasilevsky phones Stalin and asks about the possibility of evacuating civilians and industry from the city. Stalin says that would be a decision to surrender the city and forbids any such preparations for evacuation or even industrial sabotage. With these orders, the
Ja zobaczmy jeszcze tego MODA.
for Stalingrad.
MODA.
Units of 6th Army are unable, however, to break into the city yet. Yeremenko is counterattacking the corridor between the Don and Volga all this time, trying to cut off all the advanced troops from 14th Panzer Corps. On the 26th, 4th Tank Army's left and 62nd Army's right, attacking as a pincer, managed to squeeze the corridor down to 4 kilometers, but they cannot close off and isolate the German mobile divisions who are supplied by air. Anton Lopatin's 62nd Army defends the north, northwest, and western approaches to the city. But with the Germans at the Volga to the north and pushing past Sokharevka, some of its units are threatened themselves with encirclement. By the end of the week, 62nd's left wing has been driven into 64th Army's rear. So on the 29th, Yeremenko will transfer control
Ja pierdolę.
to the southeastern front. By now, Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzers, attacking from the southwest, have advanced to southeastern front's intermediate defense line. But from the 26th, they have stopped to regroup in the face of ever-stiffening Soviet defense. He's located a weak spot in the Soviet defenses, some 20 kilometers long, running west from Afganirovo Station. It's defended by 126 rifles from 64th Army, but they are missing nearly all of their artillery. Hoth sends in the 24th and 14th Panzer Divisions with the Romanian infantry on the left flank, and they have a huge superiority in men, armor, and artillery. They break through that day, advancing 20 kilometers or so and taking Zeti. This sabotages 64th Army's entire defense along the railway line and threatens the rear of both 64th and 62nd Armies, so they have to withdraw. But Mikhail Shumilov still has some of the 64th defending the bulge towards the River Don from Basargino Station, and some of the 62nd is defending north of the Kalach-Stalingrad railway line, and they are in serious jeopardy. However, on September 1st, the Panzers do not continue north to link up with 6th Army and surround the enemy, but swing east and try to drive on Stalingrad.
Stalingrad.
This fails though.
Stalingrad.
And Army commanders Kemp and Hoth were disconcerted with the large gap that had formed between 14th and 24th Panzer Divisions.
Stalingrad.
Defeat and destroy the enemy to its front.
US Navy.
Panzer Division's failure to link up with 6th Army forces to the north. The next day, Paulus moves some forces south to remedy the situation. His 71st Infantry links up with the Romanian 20th Infantry Division from the 4th Panzers near the railway station at Voroponovo, and the attackers become a solid front. The battle for the suburbs of Stalingrad now
Do,
begins
do,
in
do,
earnest.
do.
Paulus and Hoth both launched their attacks the
Chamberlain.
morning of the 3rd to break the city's defenses, even as Soviet commander Georgy Zhukov's Stalingrad front armies come from the north to try to break the Axis corridor from the Don to the Volga and link up with 62nd Army. On the 5th, the Soviets renew their counterattacks against the corridor, now with 4 armies. The fighting that day, well, that day and all the rest of the week, is bloody and brutal, and extremely costly for the Soviets in men. But the bitter truth was that Zhukov's entire offensive had stalled. This offensive, though, did force Paulus to halt the 51st Army Corps drive on the city and send its air support to the north. And the 14th Panzer Corps as well must block partial Soviet penetrations in the corridor all week long.
Kupa, kupa, kupa śmierdzi.
Panzer Corps Commander Gustav von Wittersheim tells Paulus he needs more support to hold the northern flank. But Paulus insists taking the city is the only priority, even as 14th Panzer Corps are being kept too busy to help in taking the northern factory districts. Despite the diversion of the attacks on the corridor, though, the Axis makes some gains on the 6th from Orlovka around to Gumrak.
Rosja.
On the 7th, the 51st Army Corps resumes its drive, and they do gain ground, but because of the attacks on the corridor, and because Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army's attacks from the south and the Duggan 64th Army, Paulus orders the 51st to turn to the northeast
Luxembourg.
and take the Soviets' Orlovka salient. And on the 10th, the 29th Motorized Division finally breaks through to the Volga on the southern side of the city at Kuporosnoye. That day, the Soviet 62nd Army is hit all along its line from north to south, with its units in the center defending just 2 kilometers from the heart of the city. The suburbs are slowly falling. A wedge has been driven between the 62nd and 64th armies. The Orlovka salient is shrinking. Paulus and Hoth are making adjustments for their final assault on the city of Stalingrad. By nightfall on September 11th, Stalingrad's defenses have shrunk to the core of the city, a bridgehead in the south and the northern factory district. Now holding the high ground west and southwest of the city, the assault companies of the Wehrmacht prepare for the final storm. But before the signal to attack is given, 3 major conferences take place that will decide the fate of Stalingrad and those fighting for it. In the afternoon, Maximilian von Weitz, commander of Army Group B, and Franz Halder, Army Chief of Staff, at Vinnytsia in Ukraine. After the daily situation report, Hitler turns to the pressing matter at hand, the attack on Stalingrad. Halder confidently estimates they need around 10 days to seize the city.
What? Co oni stworzyli? XD?
And regroup. Hitler decides to shift the rest of 48th Panzer Corps from 4th Panzer Army to Paulus's 6th Army, and orders the attack on the city to begin in the early morning hours the next day, September 13th. At the same time those plans are being finalized,
Special rights.
Zhukov arrives at Joseph Stalin's headquarters in the Kremlin. The attempts to pierce the German 14th Panzer Corps with a combined assault by 1st Guards Army, 24th Army, failed. By now, the front is just 6 kilometers away from the northern factory district, and no more than 2 kilometers from Stalingrad city center. Zhukov, though, is convinced that if they tie the Germans down in fighting for the city, then they can mount a large-scale counteroffensive and liquidate the Axis corridor between the Volga and Don rivers. Soviet reconnaissance has indicated that the overextended German force might be vulnerable to a series of strategic assaults, and probing attacks have found weak points in sectors controlled by the Wehrmacht's allies. However, Zhukov thinks they won't be able to gather the force for such a move until November.
Rosja. Battle plans.
They will funnel just enough troops, ammunition, and supplies over the border to keep 62nd and 64th armies alive and fighting. Also on the night of the 12th in Stalingrad itself, Commissar Nikita Khrushchev is searching for a new commander for the 62nd Army to replace
Sigma.
von Lopatin. Khrushchev consults with the commanders around him, and the spotlight soon falls on Vasily Chuikov, deputy commander of 64th Army. When Khrushchev asks Chuikov his opinion on how to defend the city, Chuikov answers, there is little wiggle room for interpretation of Stalin's orders. Stalingrad is not to be given up, period. Satisfied by the answer, the council announces Chuikov as new commander of the 62nd Army, and basically the defense of Stalingrad itself. At once, Chuikov moves to his new headquarters at the Mamayev Kurgan, an ancient Tartar burial mound. On paper, 62nd Army has 12 divisions and 7 separate brigades. However, only the NKVD divisions and a few of the recently arrived rifle units from Stavka Reserve are close to full strength. Most divisions are short on
Poszli
automatic
o, dobra, niech będzie.
124th and 149th.
O, jeszcze to trzeba zrobić. Ja pierdolę, zapomniałem. Rok minął czasu, a ja nie zrobiłem tego.
On a defensive sector
XPP.
between the Trigger, Red October, and Barakati factories.
It's fucking
West of the
Jersey.
sits the 42nd Rifle Brigade, flanked by the 23rd Tank Corps and 6th Tank Brigade. The weakest sector of the defense is in the south, held by what's left of the 35th Guards and the 131st Rifle Division. The
Rifle
forces of the
Division.
NKVD divisions are spread out equally, occupying the obvious approaches to the city. As dawn breaks on the 13th, Chuikov watches the German advance on the Mamayev Kurgan begin to
Rosja, Rosja.
massive artillery
State of fucking emergency.
pummeling the already devastated city. The gunners of 6th Army expend 760 tons of ammunition.
Nie, to mi niepotrzebne.
alone. On the 14th, German assault troops take Mamayev.
14th.
Alexander Rodintsev begins bringing in the 13th Guards Division from across the river under heavy fire the whole time, taking 30% casualties on just the 14th, trying to push the Germans back from Mamayev Kurgan. On the 14th, the central railway station changes hands 4 times between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. alone. More 13th Guards units come over the night of the 15th to help in the fight for the station. By the time they clear it of the enemy the 16th, it has changed hands 15 times. All
15
of that,
times.
2 Soviet regiments storm Mamayev Kurgan from the north and northeast, clearing the Germans and their machine guns from the summit and holding on against repeated German attacks over the following days. The Germans and
GM
the
Bureau.
5th divisions fight their way into the city center, the 94th into Minin and towards the junction of Soviet 62nd and 64th armies. The morning of the 17th, Chuikov calls for immediate reserves for the depleted 62nd Army. He asks for 2 or 3 divisions. He gets 2 brigades that evening, one of them just in time to stop a German breakthrough on the Tsaritsa. On the 18th, the defenders in Stalingrad get some brief respite from the constant air and artillery bombardment of the city, as those forces are diverted to a counterattack by Zhukov's forces from the north. The Soviet 1st Guards, 66th and 24th Armies attack towards Gumrak, Gorodishche. Their attack advances 3 kilometers uphill before the German infantry, armor, and dive-bombing Stukas stop it in its tracks. At the southern limit of 62nd Army, Soviet Marines of the 92nd Brigade now hold the enormous grain elevator, where close-quarter battle rages with the Germans from the 17th, holding off 10 separate attacks on the 18th alone. At noon on the 19th, Zhukov resumes his attack
Benelux.
but his forces are again repulsed. Chuikov launches his own attack at the same time from Mamayev Kurgan towards the central railway station to cut off those German units that are advancing in the city center. They do make some progress, but not enough to relieve the pressure in the city center. By the 21st, the Germans are behind the railway station in force with armor. 62nd Army's left flank is also in danger of being turned in the south of the city, where both the German 14th and 24th forces are.
Dobra, zostało mi już tylko 60 000, bo sobie dług spłaciłem, ale ulga, że już długo nie ma. A widzisz.
By now, the Soviets have lost the central landing stage on the river, and the Germans who hold it can watch and attack the traffic on the Volga to and from 62nd Army's rear. Even more serious, the Germans could be expected to push along the Volga bank, north and south of the landing stages, to slice 62nd Army away from its ferries. So on the 23rd,
Mam 300 tego, 600 improve.
that morning, the 284th Rifle Division, Siberians, crosses the river under German fire. 10 a.m.,
Okay.
Chuikov's counterattack kicks off, and the 95th and 284th push the Germans back towards the railway line and the station. They cannot fully clear the enemy from the river, however, or make contact with the troops on the south side of the Tsaritsa. The 13th Guards, having also received reinforcements over the river, drive the Germans from the central landing stage. Despite these minor gains for 62nd Army, though, by the 25th, resistance in the southern half of the city has mostly collapsed. The Germans reached the Volga north of the Menina River Valley, cutting off a chunk of Soviet forces there, and the Soviets now hold just the area around Mamayev Kurgan, a few pockets in the center, and the factories and northern suburbs. With progress being made in the south, Paulus shifts his focus towards the northern suburbs of the city and the three factories south of Rindok. These huge barricade and Red October factories are fortresses, as are the huge apartment blocks of the factory workers. And the steel plant Red October, Krasny Oktyabr, has its own landing stage on the river. 11 German divisions now stand before 62nd Army. They will strike very, very soon. Paulus is reinforcing the main shock group for the northern attack. 389th and 295th Infantry Divisions with the 24th Panzers and 100th Jaegers. The 100th Jaeger Division will attack Mamayev Kurgan. Chuikov is already worried by the Germans holding the southern and western slopes only 100 meters from the summit. The summit looks down over the factory district. At 6 a.m. the 27th, Chuikov launches spoiler attacks, but at 8 the Luftwaffe comes in and pins 62nd Army down, bombing its headquarters. By 10:30, they've also blown the Soviet strongpoint off the top of Kurgan, and elements of the 100th and 389th Infantry, 24th Panzer Divisions, then attack both Mamayev Kurgan and the Krasny Oktyabr factory. By 2 p.m., they've reached the western edge of the factory complex along a fairly long line. And by the evening, the Soviets hold only the northern and eastern slopes of Mamayev Kurgan. The Germans have advanced 3 kilometers. Mikhail Shumilov's attacks with the 64th Army from the south do distract the invaders, but the Germans are established now at Kuprasnoye between 64th and 62nd Armies.
Nice tank destroyer.
That night, the remainder of the 193rd Rifle Division crosses the Volga under heavy, heavy fire. By morning, are established in the cookhouses of the Oktyabr factory complex. On the 28th, German dive bombers target
30 jakie zrobimy.
knocking 5 of 6 steamboats working it out of action, as Chuikov has Soviet artillery focused on the summit of Mamayev Kurgan. Neither side holds the summit anymore. It's no man's land, raked by fire from both sides. The factory complex is still holding against
Factory
the attackers.
complex.
They have overrun parts of the workers' village to the west and broken through Soviet forward lines at the southeast of the Silikat factory. Despite German progress, the Soviet troops still hold out defiantly in the Silikat factory and Barakadi village. On the 29th and 30th come heavy German attacks to destroy the Orlovka
Minus
stadium.
15%.
At the northernmost Soviet position in the city, this is where Zhukov's forces are trying to reach to relieve
Co my tu
the
mamy?
army, and it's
Operational
on the northern side of the factory
integrity, air doctrine, research speed.
3 kilometers wide and is surrounded by Germans on 3 sides. The salient has, though, been under attack for weeks and is now held by only around 250 men. The remnants of the
troops.
112th Rifle Division and 115th Rifle Brigade. On the 29th, Germans
Blitzkrieg, nie chcę Blitzkriegu.
and the attacks continue on the 30th, putting more pressure on the Oktyabr and Barakadi factory complexes as German pincers close around Orlovka. To reinforce the factory district, over the night of the 30th, the 42nd relieving 23rd Tank Corps, who were down to 17 machines and 100 men. The 39th Guards Division, under 4,000 strong by this time, really doing so in the nick of time. They take up position west of Oktyabr, turning the workshops into fortified strongpoints to repel the persistent attackers. No help can be sent to the Orlovka salient, though, and the German pincers close, surrounding 500 Soviet troops in what is now the Orlovka Gully. Since the attacks from the north have failed to relieve the pressure on the city, Stavka orders diversionary attacks to the south by the 51st and 57th Armies, starting on the 29th, and by Shumilov's 64th on October 2nd, try and reach the village of Peshanka and meet up with 62nd Army. October 4th, Paulus begins his 4th and biggest series of attacks so far, now against the 3 gigantic factory fortresses Krasny Oktyabr, Barakadi, and the tractor plant. Adolf Hitler has set a deadline of October 14th for taking the city. But you know, the first assault in mid-September was repulsed. Bigger ones on the 22nd and 27th had done a lot of damage and gained a lot of ground, but still had not won the battle. On just October 5th, German dive bombers make over 2,000
Brakuje tylko przyczepy siewnika, rozrzutnika i chwastownika. No troszkę ci brakuje.
Orders Chuikov to counterattack the 5th to clear Barakati and the tractor plant. But you know, that's not possible. Because of this, the 6th is comparatively quiet. Chuikov is against the counterattack idea and wants to use any and all respite time to reinforce his units. But he eventually and reluctantly agrees to counterattack the 7th. He also moves his headquarters further up the Volga near the tractor plant, since all the German shelling has been piling up the bodies in and around the old one. The counterattack the 7th does not go off though, since 2 German divisions, backed by tanks, assault the tractor plant that day, and by the day's end, they've taken a block of the workers' apartments and moved towards the stadium. 120 men from the 500 trapped last week in the Orlovka Gully managed to break free after being bombarded for 5 days. They fall back and join the defense of the tractor.
Join the defense.
The fighting eases again.
Signal Company.
Paulus prepares for his once and for all final assault on the city that will be launched next week. What about Chuikov? He's by now only got like 55,000 men, 950 artillery pieces, and 500 mortars, and only around 80 tanks. The 8th Air Army has 188 planes, 101 bombers, 63 dive bombers, and 24 fighters, and that is not in any way going to chase off the over 1,000 planes of Luftwaffe 4 that the Germans have. They also have some 90,000 men and 300 tanks and as many as 2,000 artillery pieces and mortars. So what is his defense plan? He holds a line from Rynok in the north through the factory district, the northeastern slope of Mamayev Kurgan, and a few positions around the central station. He is only a few kilometers from the Volga max in the north, and recon points to the big attack being again against the factory complexes. So he moves the 95th Rifle Division off Mamayev Kurgan slopes and between the 37th Guards and 308th Rifle Divisions defending Krasny Oktyabr.
Rosja.
Time in 2 months, there is a complete lull in the Stalingrad sector.
Kurwa mi się cikać chce. Jeszcze z 15 minut będziemy streamować, bo o 5 mam lekcję z niemieckiego. Pyk, pyk, pyk. Ale mogę 3 dywizje, tak?
Attention.
If they broke through, they would roll up our front, striking south along the Volga embankment. A very strong shock group was being created for this purpose, consisting of 5 divisions. About 30,000 fresh German troops were arriving in Stalingrad for the offensive. Chuikov told us the blow was being prepared for October 14th. At 4:20 p.m. that day, German machine gunners break into the tractor factory. At 5 p.m. a counterattack is launched from the stadium. It fails. The Germans have invaded the plant in force. By
Kurwa, 400 samolotów mają.
on 3 sides. Over the rest of the night, the advance has steadily widened. The narrow streets littered with dead bodies. The Germans fight their way through to the Volga on a 2,000-meter front. The 62nd Army is now split in two. The right flank pinned down north of the Morkaya Machetka. Plans are made for the deployment of the 138th Division, hopefully to arrive in force late the 16th. With the dawn, the German assaults begin anew, trying to blast their way south from the tractor factory to Barakati. But the Soviet T-34 tanks have been dug into the road and open fire at a range of 100 meters, stopping the advance and blowing up over a dozen panzers. And once the advance is stopped, Soviet artillery from the east bank and Katyusha rockets on the west one just savage the enemy.
Gardez vos rangs.
And as the Germans bring up reinforcements and the rest of Soviet 138th Division finally arrives, Chuikov issues his orders this evening.
Dobra.
Stalingrad tractor plant is
Dobra, zwracam.
attacking STP to the south along the railway line in an attempt to seize Barakati. 2. 62nd Army continues to hold its positions, beating off fierce enemy attacks. 3. 138th Red Banner Rifle Division from 4 a.m. 17th October to occupy and stubbornly defend the line, under no circumstances to allow enemy to approach Leninsky Prospect and Barakati factory. Ivan Lyudnikov's 138th Rifle Division has crossed the Volga in force, and as the week begins, they are getting into position at Barakati, behind the factory and towards the river. Leon Tigurtiev's 308th is in the factory itself and the workers' settlement. The German attacks hit them hard, driving south from the tractor plant and along the Volga. Dive bombers and fighter bombers create a literal wall of fire sweeping towards the Soviet positions. In fact, on the 17th, the entire perimeter of Soviet 62nd Army is under fire. The initial assaults are repulsed this day, but toward Barakati, German troops break a gap between the 138th and 308th along the railway line. They reach the north
Railway line.
of Barakati. By the evening of the 18th, after literally fighting...
Mam 3 dywizje tam, no to chyba sobie damy radę. Najpierw trzeba będzie tych anarchistów wcisnąć.
On the 19th and 20th come more attacks on Spartanovka.
I żeby nas koło Madrytu wywaliło, bo jak będzie Bilbao, to
German reinforcements reach the city.
ex kurwa PayPay.
Although a wholesale German breakthrough to the Volga was still held in check,
Jeszcze ile?
62nd had taken fearful punishment
24,
on the 14th
3 dni.
October. And the depth of the Soviet bridgehead on the western bank in Stalingrad now reached little more than a
Walencja, no dobra.
now reinforced. Strong German attacks begin the 21st against Krasny Oktyabr a bit further south, where 79th Infantry supported by tanks and dive bombers. They move along the factory railway line, and by this evening some units have penetrated the northwest of the factory. The Germans had expected to be through Barakati already the 19th though.
To jeszcze
By
sobie...
the end of the week, pretty much everybody
Kurwa, to miałeś zrobić, jasny chuj.
especially at the southwest of the factory. Both south and north of the city, the Soviets are also
Dobra, niech się jeszcze trenują chłopaki.
64th Army's right flank
O,
heading out onto the steppes.
tu mamy takie minusy, okej.
And when the Germans bring up reinforcements by night, they are pushed back to their starting points. Konstantin Rokossovsky is attacking from the north with the 24th and 66th armies, but they too fail to make any headway.
XD, czemu oni się nie ten?
On the 26th, Vasily Sokolov's 45th Division begins crossing the Volga to take position between Krasny Oktyabr and Barakati to block the German advance to the Volga and the boat landings. But this day, the 62nd Army crossing, the last line of the east bank, comes under heavy and sustained fire. Chuikov launches a counterattack at 27th to gain time for the whole division to cross. His attacks are successful enough to give them a day's respite from assaults.
Ja a nie, oni mają. I tak mamy minus 90% weather? Czy jakaś laska? XPP?
They do manage to take the southern edge of Kuporoznye. That's really it for their efforts. In the wake of the ferocious assaults on Chuikov's defenses in Stalingrad's factory district, Paulus's army controlled more than 90% of Stalingrad and was within sight of the Volga at virtually every point along its front, but had yet to achieve the objective assigned by Hitler. The remnants of Chuikov's undermanned and undersupplied army clung stubbornly to multiple elongated bridges along the river's western bank. As November begins to unfold, the waters of the Volga River begin to freeze. Ice flows in the river will be a major problem to the river traffic supplying and reinforcing Chuikov's beleaguered 62nd Army. So Paulus is going to try one more big operation in the factory. He thinks the Lazur chemical factory is his most important objective. Taking this would isolate the southern half of Chuikov's army. This time, he will include 8 pioneer battalions and their demolition equipment. They will blast the path to the
La 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 la.
On the 6th, though, Hitler's Army Group B order to 6th Army is, before resuming the attack to recapture the Lazur chemical factory,
XPP.
2 sections of the city that still holds east of the gun factory and east of the steel factory are to be taken.
No i mamy kurde jakiś atak, nie?
The Volga there is entirely in German hands when the assault on the chemical factory begins.
A w ogóle nie ten. Dobra, niech oni tam podsyłają wojska. Czy ja dostaję jakieś bonusy? 31%, okej. Kurwa, jeszcze nas tu zamknęli. O ja pierdolę.
Attention.
German attack wave of men and machines reaches the Volga on a 500-meter front. The 62nd Army is now split for the third time.
Pareil.
13, Krasny-Oktyabr fully falls.
XPP. Potężne kurwa XPP.
The left and right flanks of 62nd grimly hold on, but rammed right to the river edge was now a formidable German salient, which left Ryuzhnikov trapped in a
Aggressive reconnaissance.
700 meters. Behind them was the river. This was now beginning to freeze, causing problems for the Soviet river traffic bringing men and supplies into the city. During November 9th, the temperature dropped to minus 18 degrees. Another 1,000 or so men under Colonel Gorakhov still hold out in the north at Rynok and Spartanovka. 5 battered
Free France. Ja pierdolę.
one of them, the 13th Guards, who with 1,500 men left are currently the strongest division of 60.
Ale chujnie.
Hold out they must. Counterattack next week is to succeed. As the temperature plummets in Stalingrad, after 2 months of fighting in the city, Barakati finally falls the 14th. But the fighting grinds on for a few more days without 6th Army taking much more ground. The snow falls on the 16th. The Germans prepare for one more final assault. Chuikov's Soviet 62nd Army has only about 47,000 men total left and 19, repeat, just 19 tanks. Those men on the west of the Volga are in 3 groups. There's Gorakhov with maybe 1,000 men up in Spartanovka.
Gardez vos rangs.
Yuzhnikov with 400 or so men cut off next to Barakati. The remnants of 5 divisions to the south.
Weather. Kurwa, co jest?
Yarenko and Chuikov by the phone is told to
Pareil.
just hold on. The kind of help you have never dreamed of was on the way. And oh boy, is it on the way. Soviet
Attention.
counterattack, Operation Uranus, begins.
Uranus?
Soviets have over 1 million men on the
Uranus.
front
It's there.
13,541 big guns, 894 tanks, and 1,115 planes
Attention.
deployed as follows, according to John Erickson. Nikolai Batutin's southwestern front has 18 rifle divisions, 3 tank corps, 2 cavalry corps, 1 tank and 1 motorized rifle brigade, 8 artillery regiments, the 1st Guards, 5th Tank, and 21st Armies, and 17th Air Army. Konstantin Rokossovsky's Don Front, 65th, 24th, 66th Armies, and 16th Air Army has 24 rifle divisions, 1 tank corps, 6 tank brigades, and 52 mortar and artillery regiments. And of course, Andrei Yeremenko's Stalingrad Front was left of 62nd and 64th Armies, 57th, 51st, 28th Army, and
Attention.
8th Air Army. They too number
Attention.
24 rifle divisions, with 17 rifle or motorized
Attention.
rifle brigades, cavalry corps, and 67 mortar and artillery regiments. The northern claw of the Red Army
Bougez-vous.
pincer attacks, 500,000 men strong. 7:30 a.m. with the southwestern and Don Front artillery beginning an 80-minute barrage, 3,500 guns and mortars on a 20-kilometer front. The infantry charge at 8:50 with their armor support crash into the Romanian army positions.
Click Sprint. Armor Technology.
The Red Air Force can fly.
O, niech będzie.
Three Romanian divisions,
Attention.
14th and 9th, began to disintegrate and fell back in confusion and panic, pursued by 47th Guards.
Nationalist Spain.
Ranks of the 8th Guards
A ja pomagam innym.
by tank columns beginning to break out into the Don.
Ja pier...
Plans are hastily made for German and Romanian armor to counterattack, but with the radio trucks of the 1st Romanian Armor Division knocked out, the 22nd Panzers lose touch with them. Orders are not coordinated, and the Romanian armor drives to its doom as dawn arrives the 20th, accidentally running
Ja pierdolę, co za kretyn.
armor. The German armor is pulled back, and the Romanian 3rd is broken into pieces. Within 24 hours, 65,000 Romanians are taken prisoner. On the morning of the 20th, the southern
Jak można ich cofnąć?
they attacked the Romanian 4th Army, and the elements
No
of the
nie.
4th Panzer Army were
Gardez vos
not
rangs.
actually within Stalingrad. Fog delays the beginning of Yeremenko's attack. 10 a.m., the artillery
Ja pierdolę.
5 minutes later, the armor and infantry move off from south of Beketovka and the Lake District. By day and night, they press on. And by the 20th, they have orders to reach Afganarovo Station. They reach it the morning of the 21st, and a whole 35 kilometers wide from there to Tundutovo has been ripped
Ja
away
pierdolę.
by the German 4th Panzer.
Czemu ja tym pomagałem?
The Stalingrad front forces continue on to rip a hole in the flanks of the German 4th Panzer Army, threatening its headquarters, which moved to Buzinovka. By now, both the Soviet southwestern and Stalingrad fronts are over 30 kilometers into the German rear, and there are big holes in the long extended flank of 6th Army. The 26th Tank Corps has taken Perelazovsky and is heading for the River Don. Units from the 5th Tank and 21st Army have surrounded several Romanian divisions. By the end of the 21st, elements of the southwestern front are 100 kilometers into the German rear and driving for Kalach. Mobile units
Dobra, cokolwiek.
have made 50 kilometers on the line to Zeti. The Soviets have broken through the Romanian 3rd Army on an 80-kilometer front. Rokossovsky's Don front tanks are advancing on Kalach. Early the 22nd, Sovietsky is cleared of Germans. That night, 26th Tank Corps begins trying to force the Don. German command has now been forced to move from Golubinskaya to Nizhny
Montu.
Friedrich Paulus will fly into
Ja
Stalingrad
pierdolę.
on Hitler's personal orders.
Attention.
On the 23rd at 2 p.m., southwestern and Stalingrad fronts
Gardez
link
vos
up. The Soviets take the bridge across the Don before it can be blown. Stalingrad
Bougez-vous.
is now surrounded. In an area like 55 kilometers east to west and like 30 north to south are the headquarters of 4
Attention.
Axis infantry and 1 Panzer Corps. No fewer than 4
XD.
German infantry divisions, 3 German
Gdzie? Tak to jest, jak się nie kurwa nie spojrzy.
Romanians, Croat regiment, supply units, artillery units, engineers, totaling well over 250,000 men, and likely over 300,000. 100 tanks, 10,000 trucks, 2,000 big guns. In response, German Army Chief of Staff Kurt Zeitzler and Army Group B Chief of Staff Georg von Schodenstern have been sorting out a breakout operation. Hitler radios Paulus, telling him to stay put and that he will be resupplied and relieved. That day, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein arrives from Leningrad to take command of a new Don Front Army Group. Problem is, the forces allocated to him to create this Army Group Don either don't exist, are trapped in Stalingrad, or are keeping open the link to Army Group A in the Caucasus. Manstein doesn't really know how to
Gardez vos
go
rangs.
about things. A breakout from Stalingrad
Bougez-vous.
may not be possible. If possible, it still may not be
Bougez-vous.
desirable. I mean, what if they do send in force to help their troops
Gardez
break
vos
out?
rangs.
The Soviets would have no need to continue to fortify the city, and all the force that's been used for that
Gardez
could
vos
then
rangs.
help with more huge encirclements. And 6th Army and the relief force would then be concentrated at the tip of a long exposed salient once again. Army Group A might even be in danger from the northeast then. Well, on the 26th, there is a bit of a lull as the Soviets begin to focus on the pocket and the Axis build up for a counterattack. The outer Stalingrad encirclement range by that day is well over 300 kilometers long, from Kuprosnoye to Sovietsky, then to the northeast of Kalach.
Zapomniałem o pociągach. XPP.
Attention.
South of Samopalovka and Yazovka.
Gardez vos rangs.
27. Stavka orders the coordination of the Don and Stalingrad
Gardez vos rangs.
future attempts to destroy 6th German Army under Vasilevsky. On the 28th, the southwestern Don and Stalingrad fronts renew their attacks. They are not as successful as the initial
Weather.
attacks were.
Kurwa, o chuj chodzi z tą weather.
Actually counterattacks the
Jebano.
Continuez l'attaque.
against Nikolai Batutin's southwestern front's right wing. They are thrown back. Soviets there
Gardez vos
go
rangs.
on the defensive afterwards. Prokofy Romanenko's 5th Tank Army is being frustrated by both
Gardez vos
German
rangs.
and Romanian defenders along the Chir and Don rivers, and still cannot take Surovikino or Rishkovsky. Over the next couple of days, the fighting along 5th Tank Army's front is inconclusive, though on the 30th, the Soviets have created a bridgehead on the Chir which could be used to frustrate German attempts to relieve Stalingrad. As for the Don front, they're pushing east from near Kalach as the German 6th Army withdraws into the Stalingrad pocket. German
Continuez
resistance is
l'attaque.
proving stubborn, showing the Soviets that even the 9 armies they have in the region might not be enough
O chuj chodzi z tą pogodą? Ja nie wiem, nie mam pojęcia.
defensive and destroy the Axis forces trapped in the city. Much of the Stalingrad front is actually doing side operations against 6th Army south and east, but the 51st Army is heading south towards Kotelnikovo. They cannot take
Kotelnikovo.
before 6th Panzer Division arrives though, so they go over to the defensive. By this time, Manstein's Army Group Don has assigned Army Group Hoth, what's left of the 4th Panzer Army, plus what's left of 2 Romanian Army Corps, combined into a new Romanian 4th Army, a double job. The Romanians are to delay the Soviet advance on Kotelnikovo long enough for Hoth to put together a strike force to reinforce or rescue Sixth Army. Nikolai Vatutin's Soviet Southwestern Front has been gearing up for more big attacks on the river here since the 28th, although Romanenko's 5th Tank Army has kept up the pressure on Ryzhovsky. The plan for Vatutin's forces is to break through the enemy just southwest of Ostrovsky, then head south, and then southeast towards Nizhne Cherskaya. When things kick off the 7th, there are gains, but there are heavy casualties. Romanenko, however, insists that 1st Tank Corps achieve its goals, no matter the cost. In other words, destroying the enemy's Nizhne Cherskaya grouping by the end of the 8th. However, the Germans counterattack early that morning, and within a few hours wreck about a third of that tank force, 53 tanks, losing just 10 of their own. With the Soviets convinced that this was the area from which the Germans would launch an attack to try and relieve Stalingrad, Stavka then orders a 5th Shock Army to be created to reinforce 5th Tank Army and beat the 48th Panzer Corps, prevent such a relief operation. Yeremenko's Stalingrad front is to form this shock army by the 12th, so in just 4 days. While this shock army is forming, the 5th Tank Army is still attacking on the tier. The 9th and 10th attacks the General Mayo
Ja pierdolę.
At the end of the day, the 10th, Stavka intelligence reports German reinforcements en route. So on the 11th, the 5th Tank Army goes on the defensive.
Chuj z tą.
Limited attacks ordered against Vikino and Ostrovsky just to tie down, wear down the 11th Panzer, 336th Infantry Divisions. They do manage to expand the bridgehead west of Surovikino, make 2 separate small breaks on the river. But above all, they continue diverting the attention of the 48th Panzer. Around the Stalingrad pocket, front commanders on the Soviet and Yeremenko had been ordered to keep up at least some sort of offensive operations while they await the arrival of Rodion Malinovsky's 2nd Guards Army bolster their forces. Yeremenko's Stalingrad front was an army
Barcelona.
by December 5th, Rokossovsky realizes that without the 2nd Guards Army, or someone's help, further attacks are useless. Chief of Staff Alexander Vasilevsky agrees in general, but attacks continued by all the Don Stalingrad front armies, the 8th to 10th, to soften up the enemy, where they planned to have Malinovsky attack. The Red Army did come close to undoing 6th Army's defenses during these attacks, though. While most were failures, 21st Army's attack on the western flank on the 8th cut a 2-kilometer wide and 6-kilometer deep hole in the German defenses by nightfall, capturing several high points. And it took until the 11th for 14th Panzer Corps to clear them from their rear in a close-run battle. Had the 14th Panzers failed to do so, how was this position made to collapse? Time is not on 6th Army's side, though. On the 10th, Paula sends a message to Army Group Dawn.
Co ja to chciałem zrobić? Nie wiem kurwa co ja chciałem zrobić, ale...
Really beginning to affect morale and his army's defensive capability. The recent active defeats all over the region,
Niech
the
spierdalają na
demolition
drzewo.
of the 3rd Army and the encirclement of the German 6th Army by Operation Uranus. The Red Army outer ring fronts on the Cheer and the Axine leave German High Command and Erich von Manstein's Army Group Dawn with only one option to prevent their entire front from collapsing: launch a sudden and immediate thrust to reach 6th Army from the southwest. So on December 12th, Operation Wintergewitter, Winter Storm, begins. Manstein begins his offensive from Kotelnikovo.
Continuez l'attaque.
Hermann Hoth is in tactical charge of 13 divisions for this offensive, attacking the Soviet 51st Army. Well, the German 6th and 23rd Panzer Divisions
Supply consumption, army fuel consumption.
with what's left of the Romanian 6th and 7th Corps, hit 51st Army pretty hard and reached the southern approaches to the Mishkova River the morning of the 14th. Wintergewitter also further messes with the plans for 2nd Shock Army. Late on the 14th, as 2nd Shock Army prepared to finally attack the Stalingrad pocket the following morning, Stavka orders them down to shore of the 51st Army, and again, it will take a few days for them to get there and get in position. There has been a relative lull in the fighting around the pocket for a few days in anticipation of 2nd Shock's offensive. While this is going on, on the 13th, Markin Popov's new 5th Shock Army begins its offensive as planned, surprising the enemy, and they, Romanenko's 5th Tank Army, hit hard at Ryzhovsky and the confluence of the Cheer and the Don. Rychowski finally
Gardez vos
falls
rangs.
that day, and the Ostrovsky bridgehead is also now 18 kilometers wide and several kilometers deep. Pompov
Pareil.
orders his forces that night to take Verkhnechirski, as they do by the 15th. 5th Tank Army takes Surovikino. And on the 16th, the Soviets begin Operation Little Saturn. Follow-up to Operation Uranus, which was also, until it was
Uranus.
supposed to be spearheaded by 2nd Shock Army. They hit the Italian 8th Army on the Don. There are also huge attacks on Army Group Pullet on the Cheer. So Manstein's west flank is suddenly in real trouble. The Little Saturn attacks are by the Southwestern Front's 1st and 3rd Guards Army, together with 6th Army from the Voronezh Front. While this operation develops, 5th Tank and 5th Shock Army's operations on the Cheer and the Don become a Tormos and offensive on Little Saturn's eastern flank. By the 17th, Little Saturn turns into a rout of the Axis forces in its path. Thing is, Hawk is still advancing, and his forward tanks have reached the Aksai River. The 6th Panzer Division is 56 kilometers from Stalingrad. But on the flanks, the Italian 8th Army is collapsing. Inside Stalingrad, though, Paulus seems not to be making any effort to break out. So on the 18th, Manstein sends his intelligence officer into the Stalingrad pocket to coordinate with Paulus. Both Paulus and his chief of staff tell him that 6th Army's lack of ammunition, mobile forces, and heavy weapons mean that any breakout attempt would be disastrous. They want more ammunition airlifted in to help them hold out until help can reach them. By the 19th,
Attention.
the attacking armies of Little Saturn, 320,000 men and 1,000 tanks strong, have collapsed Army Group Poland's defenses and shattered the
Weather.
Italian 8th Army.
Kurwa, o chuj chodzi z tą pogodą? Powiedzcie mi.
Because of this, Eric
Hills.
ordered Paulus to try to break out.
A,
Now, Paulus again refuses. The 20th,
on plan defensyw.
Army Chief of Staff Kurt Seitzler to arrange for Paulus to break out.
A,
On the 21st,
okej, czaję bazę.
appeals to Hitler to order Paulus to break out.
To nie.
Quote Paulus about fuel shortages and says no. So on the evening of the 22nd, Manstein tells OKH that the relief of 6th Army has to wait until they can stop Little Saturn. By now, Hoth's drive towards Stalingrad is losing momentum anyway. 23rd, he stopped on the Mishkova River.
Attention.
24th, he is driven back. And by the end of the 23rd, attacking south
Gardez
from
vos
the
rangs.
Don and west from the Cheer, Little Saturn has surrounded, captured,
Attention.
or destroyed most of the Italian 8th Army and forced Group Polet to retreat south. They have cut a gap 180 kilometers wide between Army Group B and Army Group Don. That day on the 24th, Soviet 24th and 25th Tank Corps from the southwestern front attack Manstein's Army Group Don's airfields, which are absolutely vital to supply 6th Army. By the 24th, the mobile groups of Little Saturn have done what no one on either side thought really possible. They have broken around 200 kilometers into Army Group
XPP. Dobra, ja będę kończył, kurde bele. Trzymaj to się. Tego typu. Wieczorkiem nie wiem, no zależy na co będę miał ochotę, albo hojka, albo gotyczka sobie ciupniemy. Prawdopodobnie hojka sobie pomęczymy. Ale dobra, trzymaj to się. Na razie.